Hello, today I want to do a video on So You Want to Get Into. And this time I'm going to do Rod Stewart. So I got my little t-shirt, there's Rod, and we're ready to go. So I got this t-shirt when my wife and I saw him a few years back in Canandaigua, which is just outside of Rochester, New York, about 45 minutes. It's on Lake Canandaigua, which is one of the Finger Lakes in western New York. And uh, he played there, and his opening act was Cyndi Lauper, which was an interesting choice. Wouldn't have thought those two would tour with each other, but everyone seemed to have fun. And so Rod's kind of an interesting guy. I would have to say, like, kind of fuckish, even if he's like mid-70s, maybe even pushing late 70s. And he's very energetic. He's very charismatic. It's hard not to like the guy when you hear him talk or sing. He's just completely genuine guy, but he is out to lunch. And when he got up on stage, he said, "Hello, it's really great to be here in Cleveland. I know Cleveland really well because I'm in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice." And like the screen and behind him showed a picture of him with the Faces, a band he was in before he started his solo career, actually kind of at the same time, and him as a solo artist. And nobody had the heart to tell him. It was like, God, we're about 300 miles away from there, so on the same highway. It's off of 90, so you're just up the road a bit, but you are in a very different state. And it was funny that they showed in one of the, in the backdrop with the show videos while he's singing. So there was an instrumental, I forget which song it is, and it sort of shows like areas of his life, at different times, and all the different hairstyles he's had over the years, and all the different clothes he's worn. And there's a picture of him getting knighted by Prince William, and he's looking up there. He's like, "I love getting knighted," and it's just kind of like that's him. He's a bit of a goofball. He's he's unique. His voice is unique. He comes by it very honestly, even if he's slightly a joke of a man. But it's hard not to like him. And so I thought, like, I'm down here in Virginia, and when I was packing my bag, I decided I was going to just grab a bunch of T-shirts. I didn't know what they were. I just grabbed a bunch of them and started throwing them in my bag. And then when I got here, I thought, oh, I don't really wear these T-shirts very often. Usually when I go to a concert, I get a T-shirt, like most people with a soul, because I know Rod's not hurting for money, but a lot of these bands, they make most of their money off the T-shirts, which is totally amazing. Depends on the nature of the contract, but we'll leave that aside. So in this video, I was just going to talk about 5 hits that, if you're a Rod Stewart fan, they're kind of obvious, but if you're sort of new to him, it's a good place to start. And then I'm going to give you 5 deep cuts that you would only hear on an album, or maybe one of those deep cut stations on like satellite radio. So the first one I wanted to do, not in any particular order. I think at least these hits are in order, but I didn't really do it. I just kind of went through each album and thought, yeah, this is a good one. So the first one is Handbags and Glad Rags. Now this one is actually a cover song written by a guy named Mike Dabo, who was a sort of a musician. He wrote a lot of songs. He was in a couple different bands throughout the 60s and 70s. And this song is really just kind of an interesting song. I think it really it's very sad, not in a wistful kind of lost love, but just kind of like, what the hell are you doing with your life? So essentially, he sings a song about a girl whose family grew up real, kind of poor, but they established themselves. They saved up all this money, and the chorus goes, why don't you just throw them all away? They had handbags in the glad rags that your old granddad had to save to buy you. I think that's how it goes. And this was actually like a re-recorded version of this. I think by somebody else because Ricky Gervais couldn't afford this version. Was used on The Office, but it was a very similar sounding singer, just not Rod Stewart. And I really like it. It's not a rocker, but it's got the drums and the piano are just really great. The next one is probably the most obvious one, and I tried to get like a little bit of all the different sides of him rather than like the biggest hit. The next one is probably you would know this even if you don't know Rod Stewart at all, is Maggie May, and it's a very sort of guitar, almost you would almost say like sort of English or Irish, Scottish folk music style. There's a mandolin in it, and it's basically about. I think this is actually a true story. That the that when Rod was maybe 16 or 17, he got involved with an older woman, and he just is sort of screwing up his life, taking away his innocence, and the lyrics are basically pretty straightforward. That he really enjoys being with this woman, but he thinks he's being used, and so he wants to do something with his life rather than just be a toy for an older woman. So it's kind of a sad breakup song in a very non-standard way. And so the third song that's a hit, this is when Rod came to America. It was on the album called Atlantic Crossing, pretty well named. And the song is called Sailing. And this is a song written by somebody else, but I think Rod was probably the first one to actually do something with it in the charts. And it's got a lot of tone of something like Amazing Grace to it, where it's just sort of, you don't really, it's yearning to touch the infinite, and you can do this through sailing. And there, anybody who has tried to spiritual, there are many ways to get there, and the song is basically you can just discover the world through sailing. And it's just a really singable song. It sticks in your head, and a lot of Rod Stewart songs are like that. And the next song is a lot of these songs. They're just not very ordinary songs. They're just he just finds topics to sing about. They're not very straight. I love you, you love me kind of thing, or I'm sad that we broke up. I mean, there's humor in these songs. There's wisdom in these songs. It's just totally amazing that he is one of the biggest stars in rock and roll history, but I'm just amazed that a lot of these songs just don't get played. I mean, and obviously they did back then, and these are the hits, but I'm thinking, like, why aren't they playing this on classic rock? The song is called Killing of Georgie, and it's a story. I don't know whether it's true or not. I've heard that at least a bit of the facts are true, that George, the story, it's basically a story song, and the story is about a gay kid who moves to New York City and sort of discovers a new life for himself. This is probably a very common story in the gay community. When you grow up in a small town, people are much more conservative, and you move to New York, and it's just a free for all. And because you'd been so repressed that you kind of just let go in the city. And one night, Georgie just is in the wrong time in the wrong place and gets killed. And the second part of the song is basically just him moaning, not moaning because that's sort of derogatory, or sort of, complaining, but just sort of really sad about the death of his friend. The next song is an 80s song. It's very 80s, extremely 80s, like achingly 80s. It's called Young Turks. I was either going to do this or Baby Jane, which is also very 80s. And I decided to go with this, mostly because I think it had made a bigger splash here in America than it did uh, in Britain, but whatever. In Young Turks, it's a very singable chorus, and it's a lot of fun. And the videos are ridiculous. Like the music videos are just ridiculous. Anything with Rod Stewart is ridiculous, over the top, but it's completely genuine. It's not tongue in cheek. There's no irony involved with it. It's just straightforward. Rod either amming it up or being a dumbass. There's a little bit of everything in that. So I would start with there. These are good places to start. There's tons of stuff, lots of songs that you may or may not know. I tried to avoid cover songs or like big cover songs. Like he did a whole rash of Motown style songs. I don't know if they were all Motown songs, but sort of R&B songs that when Rod was coming up as a kid, he just like, the song "I'm Losing You." That's definitely a Motown song by the Temptations, but there's a lot of that. And he does a really good job. The guy's got an amazing voice, very raspy, very just soulful voice, but sometimes he just doesn't do the song justice. And often that's not so much his voice, it's down to the arrangement of the song. That it's either that the sound on the guitar is not quite right, or they're using a keyboard instead of piano, and it just doesn't really fit the song. There's also sometimes they screw with the pacings of the song, that it's either sped up too much or slowed down too much. And that was a problem that I found with a lot of the things that he did with the Jeff Beck group before he joined the Faces, is that a lot of this stuff was the pacing on a song like All Shook Up by Elvis originally, it just seems wrong. I would love it if he just did it in a very similar pace, but it didn't happen. So anyway, I'm going to do the deep cuts. And so these songs, you're just like, why aren't these songs just bigger than what they are? You can tell I get excited about Rod Stewart, so I'm only doing these videos on things that I really like. Rod Stewart, like I say, some of the songs are just like, geez, Rod, what the hell were you thinking? Other songs are like, this is genius. This is amazing. Why don't people know more about his deep cuts? And the first one I'm going to do is a song called Blind Prayer. This is a song that Rod Stewart wrote, and it is amazing. Trying not to swear as much. And it's just the instrumentation of it's really just dark and creepy, and his voice just sounds like he's in a lot of pain. And the song is, you listen to the lyrics, it's a painful song, and it's just totally amazing. It just, to me, this shows just the vocal, I wouldn't say range, because that's more about top to bottom, but just like what he can provide in his vocals. Like, nobody else could do that. I mean, not even old blues singers from like the 40s who smoked like 20 cigarettes a minute could provide that kind of voice, and that kind of pain. There's another one that's a similar one. This is similar style, but this is an old folk song from like the turn of last century called "A Man of Constant Sorrow." And it's got sort of a bluesy folk vibe to it, and he just does it, and he just does it justice in a way that only Rod could do. He can either screw things up or he can just make it incredible, and he does it right here. And it's just, I think it's wonderful. So the next one is a song from the Atlantic Crossing, like I said, that's on the same album as Sailing. So you can do all your, one-stop shopping. Basically, anything from the 1970s is fair game for him. You can just listen to any of those albums. Smiler is not a great song, but there's some interesting thoughts on there. It's not that great of an album, but there are interesting songs on there. And this song is called Three-Time Loser. It opens up the album, and it's just a really singable song. It's a bluesy rock and roll song, and it really kind of evokes the style that he had when he started off with the Faces and was when he was with Jeff Beck. It's just totally just this is his area where he just dominates and nobody can even. I mean, he beats the Rolling Stones, who do a very similar style. He can beat the crap out of Mick Jagger in his vocals. Um, and Three-Time Loser is just a great. It has a very like a vibe, and I think this is 2 or 3 years after. Exile on Main Street, but it beats the pants off of something like Tumbling Dice. It has a very Tumbling Dice style, but I like it a lot more. The next song is also from Atlantic Crossing. It's called "It's Not the Spotlight." And now this is an older song from the '60s. It has a very sort of American style to him. And at this point, Atlantic Crossing, he's gone on to moved to America, which means he left his British band behind him. Basically, the Face is split up at this point, and he's just gone on and he's playing with American musicians, American style songs, and this song is a very American, almost you would say like Tin Pan Alley style song. It's called "It's Not the Spotlight," and it's so singable. Like the song is just it just sticks in your head and you just can't get rid of it. And that's either a blessing or a curse. The last song I was going to do, which I think, like I said, if anything sums up a couple of the songs from the hits, I thought they really sum up Rod Stewart, and this one sums them up quite literally because it's fairly autobiographical, and it's a song. It must have done something in the charts because they did a video of it, and this is in 1977. The song's called "I Was Only Joking," and it's a very nostalgic song where he looks at his past and sees how there's this. He talks about his friends growing up and how his father thought that they dress up. They thought they were all Casanovas. I'm totally butchering the song, but it's really fun where he says, "My dad thought we were ridiculous, but man, we broke some heart." And I just thought, like, that's just Rod Stewart in a nutshell. He's just a fun guy. He is ridiculous, but he's so honest about it. And I was only joking. It's sort of reflecting on his life, saying, that I've made mistakes, but I'm learning. And, I think it's one of his best songs. So, as far as album recommendations, I would start with his first solo album. This one has two titles depending on where you get it. If you are looking in the UK, the album is called "An Old Raincoat Won't Ever Let You Down," and the American version of it's just called the Rod Stewart album. And it's just it doesn't have any hits. It has Handbags and Glad Rags on it, but it's just really a good introduction to what he does personally, as a solo artist, as opposed to a member of the Faces. And you can see an overlap if you maybe I'll do a video on the Faces where you could see that there's a lot of connection. And then the instrumentation, like the band are actually playing on this. He's the one deciding how to play the songs, what songs to play. He's in control over this, and so I guess that's why this is his solo album. So that's a really good place. It's the first album, and the follow up. I would say follow up rather than a deep cut album, because anything in the 1970s, like I said, other than Smiler, this is the one with the Scottish tartan on it, which I think is his family, his clan, because his father was from Scotland. The Stewart tartan on it. Which incidentally is the royal tartan, because that is the clan of the Queen. That when they united, I'll skip the history lesson, but this goes back in history that the Queen basically their link to the Scottish throne goes back to Stewart. And so anyway, he actually draws a lot from Scottish and Irish and English folk music, and then blues and rock and roll on top of it. That's what makes him so wonderful. So a follow-up, I would do the next album with Every Picture Tells a Story. It's got some great songs. There were songs in here that I just didn't get around to mentioning because I just didn't have enough time. I'm already at 20 minutes and I'm just going on and on and on. He's probably one of the best solo artists ever. And his best area of operation was 1970 to 1980 on there. So you have about 10 years of just amazing music. Yes, he did goofy songs like You Think I'm Sexy, but he did great cover songs like I Don't Want to Talk About It, which was a Crazy Horse album or a Crazy Horse song. Um, he did a Cat Stevens called The First Cut is the Deepest. These are amazing versions of the song. If you listen to the original song, Stewart just kind of makes it his own. Um, and he just does that so much. He takes a song, he says, I'm having this. It's not like he's feeling it. He's making it his own, make it to the other original one just isn't as good. So anyway, that's Rod Stewart in a nutshell. Have a lot of fun with this. I certainly had fun just coming up with this list. That's part of it. The reason why I come up with these lists is just to have fun and listen to these albums. This is probably on the lighter side of what I listen to because I'm usually kind of a metal hard rock guy, and there's blues rock on this. It's usually not that heavy, but God, that voice is one of the best in rock and roll history. So anyway, I'll see you soon.